Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Die Society podcast. In case you're joining me for the first time, my name is Caio, and I'm the author of thediesociety.com. This is a show about the upcoming Draw Steel TTRPG, where I talk about its development, my playtest experience, and, once the time is right, first and third-party content being made for the finished game. Today, I have a little experiment. For the first time in quite a few episodes, I do not have a script, except for like the intro and the outro. I'm just gonna ramble on because I want to see how the podcast feels in a more natural tone of voice. I felt like my past few episodes have been a little stilted, especially because English is not my first language, so I read kind of slow and I try to pronounce everything correctly. So today I want to see how it sounds without a script. If I don't like the final product, I'm just going to go back to having scripts. And besides the benefit of having it be more fluid, I feel like it's going to take me less time to make an episode. It usually takes me quite a few days to write a script. So since it's been already more than a month since the last episode, I'm just gonna talk into the microphone and see what comes out. Anyway, for the main topics of today, we're going to talk about the third Patreon packet that came out last month and the new rules that were announced alongside it, including a few 10th level prototypes that the devs shared on Patreon. On the second half of the podcast, I'm going to talk about the changes they're making as a result of the feedback that they got from the third Patreon packet and how it felt to play the packet with other members of the Draw Steel community. Now, for my usual warning, everything we're going to talk about here is subject to and probably will change, right? So don't get your hopes up if you really like any of the stuff I describe here, okay? Now, let's draw steel and get started. Before we get to our main topics, let's talk a little bit about the creations from the community. The first one is the Kobold Ancestry by Pesto. I was really excited for him to announce this, and I checked it out, and it's really cool. You should take a look. Then we have Zentis's Steel Compendium, which is a collection of stuff that you can access online about the rules, and also a plugin for Obsidian. If you use Obsidian, you should take a look at this because it has a lot of elements that can help you like take notes and direct the game. It's really cool. It's really, really well done. Then we have the Emblazoned Character Sheets by Darren Lammers 1992, which is a gorgeous character sheet for Draw Steel. I was really excited when I saw that. Then we have Mobile-Friendly Rules Reference PDF by Ghost of Ezekiel. You can go to his Google Drive and you can download this PDF and you can read the rules on the PDF on your phone. It's really good if you want a quick reference while you're directing. Next up is Owlbear Rodeo, DS Conditions and Tooltips by Terribly Angry Fennec. This is what it says on the tin. You can add this plugin to Owlbear Rodeo and then you'll get conditions and tooltips for it. Next is an interview with Jordy discussing class design by Aestus RPG. This is a really, really informative interview that Aestus did. I really recommend everyone that's interested in game design to watch the interview. It's really well done. I really enjoyed listening to it. Next up, introductions. It's the 0th episode of Into the Woad, a Draw Steel actual play by Robin Baggett. You can watch it on YouTube. Also on YouTube, it's Myths of Hisini. I feel like I'm saying this correctly. It's the first episode of Lavender Garden's actual play. You should check it out. The art is gorgeous. And the last actual play that we have today is Green Fog at Morning by myself, featuring Aestus RPG, John Denor from Goblin Points fame, and Tamwin 5. It was a really cool game using the third Patreon packet, and I use like picture-in-picture on the video to show you the abilities the characters are using as they're using it. It's super cool. I really enjoyed playing, and I think the final product looks quite good, like, if I can say so myself, right? Anyway, go check all of these community creations out. They're all awesome. Next up, we have the news. We've got not a lot of stuff to talk about. The first one, most important one is that the full game is already with contractors. So this means that they shared levels 1 through 10 with the playtesters, the hired playtesters they have, and they're already testing the quote unquote full game. So this is quite a progress. And according to Matt, the game will be content complete by the end of December. So once 2025 starts, they're not going to add any new systems, any new rules. They're just going to polish and test and edit. So the game is close to being content complete. Next up is the hopes that they release a starter adventure when the game is released or soon after. So this is something James talked about in his stream, and I'm really excited for this because if they come out with like a starter adventure, this is going to be perfect for people who want to play the game but don't want to think about what kind of adventure works well with the system. Next up is the Vassloria box set. We don't have a release date. They're probably going to crowdfund it next year. But Jordy said that they're aiming for half the hexes in Vassloria to be pre-filled, like filled by the designers in the book. And then the other half is going to be up to the director to customize as they see fit. Which for me is the perfect setup. I really like this kind of stuff. I like the inspiration part and then making my own stuff. So this is perfect for me at least. With regards to mechanics, we got the recent news that they're trying to make it easier for characters to self-heal to make the game more viable without a conduit. Because if you don't have a conduit in the party, it gets kind of tough. It's not that the game becomes impossible, but it definitely gets harder if you don't have someone to heal you. So they're trying to make it easier for characters to heal themselves without the need of a dedicated healer. So yeah. About the next backer packet, we have an important news item. It will have an updated license. So if you like creating content for Draw Steel, if you want to update your content from the first backer packet to the second backer packet, you're going to have a creator license to go along with it. Okay? The last news item is about Codex, the VTT that DM Hub is making for Draw Steel. And they announced that they're planning to release a beta version to Patreons, but this is probably not going to happen this calendar year. So hold your horses, chill out. We're not going to be able to test this year yet. But it's only a month until the year is over, right? So maybe early next year, I hope. I don't know. We're going to have to wait. Okay, so these are the creations from the community and the news items, so we can go to the next topic, which are the new rules. See ya. Okay, so let's talk about the third Patreon packet and the new rules. The first thing that I want to talk about is the packet itself. It's a small packet. It doesn't come with an adventure or anything. It's meant to test encounter building. So they didn't give us an adventure with the explicit purpose of us making our own adventures. So we have the rules. We have an expanded bestiary, newish encounter building guidelines, but it's mostly just the stuff I talked about on the previous episode. So if you want a full rundown of everything that was going to change and did in fact change, I suggest you listen to the last episode, episode 11 of the Dice Society podcast. So most of those changes were implemented. So surges and shields, Build-A-Bear ancestries, potencies, perks, all that stuff, it was implemented, and we got that in the third Patreon packet. Besides what was already announced, we also got the 9 classes from levels 1 to 3. So you could technically run a short campaign with the rules that we got on Patreon. And then besides these major updates in the packet, we also had some small changes that weren't announced. They made it harder for enemies and characters to shift away from danger, because it was really hard to protect a squishy character. It was really hard for the director to protect squishy monsters, because everyone could just disengage and move. Using 5e terms, you could shift away really easily. And now you can only shift 1 square, and some character options allow you to shift 2 squares, and you can't even shift into difficult terrain. So it's much harder to get away from danger. Then besides that, we got reduced damage to make the game more challenging. Many people were not complaining, but saying that the game was kind of easy, that the monsters were dying too quickly, players were steamrolling encounters. So damage was reduced, areas of effect have been reduced as well, and effects have been changed to address other kind of broken combinations. So yeah. Then they added new careers. The full list is Agent, Aristocrat, Beggar, Disciple, Explorer, Farmer, Politician, Sailor, Warden, and Watch Officer. And they no longer provide you with a title. Remember when careers had a career title? Now they provide you with a perk, which, to compare it to 5th edition, is like a small feat that doesn't give you anything combat related. Is just for flavor and out of combat abilities. You can hear everything I have to say about perks on the 11th episode of the Dice Society. Go back and listen to it. I swear, you're going to like it. I talk about everything that was changing with the game. Just remembered, the careers can also provide you with a wealth bonus in addition to the other bonuses. So this is also new. Moving on, they also have new rules for using heroic resources outside of combat, which I really liked, actually, because one thing I was thinking about is in 5e, in D&D in general, you can use your abilities, especially casters, outside of combat, because you start the day with all of your resources. But in Draw Steel, you start the day without any resources, and you have to go into battles to accumulate resources and then be able to use your bigger abilities, right? So now you can use your abilities, but only once before the next combat, and it doesn't spend any heroic resource for that one specific time if you're outside of combat. Besides that, you can no longer jump out of difficult or damaging terrain. This is to avoid some bunny hopping. Resources are working in different ways. I talked about this as well, but they are being generated roughly at the same pace. each class has a different way of generating resources, but they should roughly be equal to each other. Like in the long run, you should roughly be getting your resources in at the same pace, right? So they changed how you use them. Tactician can pump focus into marks. I talked a little bit about that, but it was implemented. They got rid of end of encounter abilities, so EOE is gone. They renamed tiers of play to echelons of play. They renamed villain power to malice, which I really liked, and it sounds like a heroic resource, but that the director is using. So malice is a really good name in my opinion. And lastly, perks. They were implemented, and you get those at every even level. So level 2, level 4, level 6, level 8, and I think level 10. You get those out of combat abilities every other level. So this is not like titles, which you acquire by doing stuff in the world, like slaying a dragon and you become a dragon slayer. Perks are just something you get from working up the level ladder. Before we finish this segment, still on the topic of new rules, even though these weren't shared in the Patreon packet, I wanna talk a little bit about the level 10 prototypes that the devs shared on Patreon, because these look really cool. They shared the conduit up to level 10 and the shadow up to level 10, and we can finally see what their vision is for high level play. Like at level 10, you're basically like a demigod. You can really influence the multiverse. You can really influence the timescape with your powers. It's some really, really out of the box stuff that doesn't really break the game, but it makes you very powerful, and you can really feel that you were a force in the world. I really enjoyed some of these abilities, and I want to just go through a couple of them. The first one I want to talk about is the level 10 conduit feature called Avatar. Just take a look at this. I'm gonna read just a couple of sentences. You are now an avatar of your god. When you take a respite, you can open a portal to rest in the presence of your deity and bring along any allies. When you do, you can ask your deity 3 questions, which the director must answer honestly if your deity knows the answers to the questions. Additionally, you can emerge from your respite in any location in the timescape where someone worships your deity. Look, this is awesome. This is super, super cool. And it's not really game breaking. This is what really gets me, because all of these abilities, if you think about D20 Fantasy, wizards can do basically all of these way earlier in the progression, right? So this one, it packages a few cool abilities into one feature that has a really evocative flavor. Like you're an avatar of your god. You can talk to your god. You can meet your god. You can rest with your god. It's super cool. I really enjoyed this kind of ability. And for the shadow, I wanna highlight Umbral Knight, which is a 6th level feature, which is like you become a shadow form. Take a look. As a maneuver, you lose control of yourself, becoming a merciless shadow creature dripping with ash. This transformation lasts until the end of the encounter, you die, or quietly focus for 1 hour outside of combat. And then it lists everything you gain. These are probably going to change, so I'm not going to bother with them. But you, during combat, becomes this shadow creature dripping with ash. It's really cool. It's what comes to mind is like a barbarian rage, but super cool in flavor. I love this. And next for the shadow is the shadow clone ability from 9th level. Look at this. If you if you like anime, at the start of your turn, at the start of each of your turns, you can forgo gaining insight to create 1d6 clones of yourself in unoccupied spaces adjacent to you. You basically make like the cloning jutsu. Jutsu, is that how you say it? I don't know. Sorry, jutsu. It's really dope. It has 1 stamina, but it has your statistics. It has a few restrictions, but it's really cool. It's not game breaking. You can think of many D20 fantasy spells that do something like this, but it's written in a way that makes you really feel like the stuff is powerful and cool and works in the world, and really imagine your character doing that. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share, these 2 level 10 prototypes. You should sign up for their Patreon if you want to playtest the Patreon packet, and if you want to take a look at these. These are really cool, I swear. Anyway, now it's time for the intermission, and then I'm gonna talk about my impressions playing the playtest packet and the feedback they got. So, see ya. Hey there. Before we move on to the next segment of the podcast, let me just quickly plug the Dice Society's new mailing list. We all know how messed up social media algorithms are and how they have a weird tendency of not showing your stuff to your followers. If you want to avoid the algorithms altogether, how about subscribing? I won't flood your inbox, I swear. I just want to send you a ping once a new piece of content is out. That's all. You can subscribe at the link in this episode's description, and you can always unsubscribe if you feel like it's not worth the space in your inbox. Thank you very much for your time. Now back to the show. Welcome back. Let's talk about the mouthfeel of the 3rd Patreon packet. As I said in the community creations section of the podcast, I playtested it with John Denor from Goblin Points, Aestus RPG, who also has a YouTube channel, and Tamwin5, which is a frequent contributor to the Draw Steel, MCDM Discord. Overall, I really enjoyed the experience. It was a little bit overwhelming to read the whole packet and try to understand all the rules in such a short time, because I gave myself like a week to prepare everything. And besides understanding the rules, prepping the encounters, finding a suitable map, prepping the VTT, which was already a lot of stuff, I also had to prepare my computer to record everything and get acquainted with OBS and install plugins and everything, and then edit everything once it was over. So it was a lot of stuff, but it was very rewarding because I really feel like the game is hitting the spot. Like, they are polishing this game to a very sharp edge. This sword is gonna cut you. All in all, like, positives. The game felt really heroic. At no point we felt like the rules were like not working with the narrative. Everything felt like it was natural and had a place, and every ability could be explained and narrated by the players. The monsters as well. I really enjoyed running the monsters. You can watch it yourself. I have links in the description of the episode. You can see how it felt to play, and you can see the abilities being used. Everything. You can really get a feeling for how it was to play the game. For the stuff I didn't like, I thought there were a bit too many conditions being applied overall. And some of those weren't really conditions. They were stuff like, oh, if you move, you take some damage. which is stuff that I have to write down on the token, on the VTT. Otherwise, I would forget. So this was a little bit on the crunchier side and a little hard to remember as someone who was running this iteration of the game for the first time. But overall, it wasn't that much. Like, I think it was workable. Like, if I had played it more times, maybe it would feel more natural. Next thing that I felt a bit overwhelming were the difficulties of tests. I'm not used to narrative games like Blades in the Dark. So when someone rolls a test and I have to think of a consequence or a benefit to award with the result, it's a little hard for me. I think maybe it gets better with practice, but in general, I had to write everything down so that I would remember it when I was playing. But again, this is very personal to me. It could feel very different for you when you're playing the game. All in all, I think the game is coming along really, really well. Aside from these minor gripes, I think the game is working really, really solidly. If you want an after-action report from one of my players, you can read Astus RPG's post on Reddit. I'm leaving a link in the description as well. He talks about how it felt to play the sensor, the things he thought worked well, the things he thought that didn't. So yeah, you can check it out on Reddit. Now, with the mouthfeel out of the way, let's talk about the proper feedback that the devs got from the packet. Not my feedback, the overall feedback. So, according to James, they got some solid feedback about surges. They were working okay, but there were too many ways to gain and apply them. If you don't know what surges are, I explained them in the previous episode, but it's basically a damage buff that you can give to your allies or give it to yourself. It's equal to your highest characteristic right now. But since there were way too many ways of having them applied and awarding them to other heroes, it was a bit confusing. I didn't feel it that much when I played, but I can imagine how over longer stretches of time it can start to feel a bit overwhelming. Now they're trying to implement a universal way for surges to work. Right now, you can track them, you just get more of them, and then you can choose to spend them on any target, and at most 3 surges at a time. But you can keep as many as you want, and they go away at the end of combat. Matt shared a playtest with this rule, and it seems to be working quite well, but we'll have to see if this makes it to the next packet. Now for feedback about shields, which are the opposite of surges, they're going away. At least for now, they were creating too many null results. So too many monsters could have shields and too many heroes could give shields. And in the end, they just absorbed a lot of damage and too many turns had nothing happen, which is just like missing in D20 Fantasy. This didn't happen too much on my playtest, but I can see how this could happen, depending on like what classes you have. On the same topic of no null result, they're also reducing the number of stuff that has immunity to magic, psionic, and weapon abilities. I feel like this was because it was a director may I situation where you had to ask, is this a magic ability? Is this a psionic ability? Is this a weapon ability? But overall, it just is one less thing to reduce damage. Okay. They also got some feedback about conditions, and now apparently most of them are only going to last until the end of turn. So no save, no nothing. They just last one round and that's it. Your chance to resist them was to have a high score and avoid the potency of the triggering ability. And speaking of potencies, their numbers have also been adjusted. So there are fewer occasions where a monster just can't be targeted by your ability, right? Because some monsters had high characteristics, and then it didn't matter how high you rolled, they always avoided the condition. So this is all getting balanced and streamlined, so conditions are better to work with. As for resource generation, sensors and tacticians are also changing, right? Because on this packet, sensors and tacticians could bank focus and judgment on targets, and the more they banked their resource, the better the effects the target was being subjected to, like slowed and that kind of stuff. If you banked more, you would have a more powerful effect. You get it. This was a little hard to track. You can see Astus's report. I don't think he felt that, but reading the class, I kind of did. I don't know. It's up to each player, right? But now you have your mark and your judge, and you can do that to a monster. And then you have triggers that spend focus and judgment that do those kinds of effects on the target, right? So it's not something you bank, you just have triggers that spend your resource to have those effects. I prefer this approach. We'll have to see how it looks in the final game. And lastly, James mentioned that they're implementing some abilities that increase potency temporarily and the ability of characters to resist potencies from monsters. So it's not only static numbers that you compare, you also have tactical choices as to whether you can resist something or you spend a resource to apply an effect, raise temporarily your potency, that kind of stuff. It's not very well explained how all of this is going to work, but I'm sure we'll be able to see that in the next packet. And that's what they shared. So I don't know if there was more feedback, but we don't have access to that kind of stuff. So this is what we got. I feel like most of these changes are positive. I really like especially the less stuff triggering on magic, psionic, and weapons. As you can watch on the Green Fog at Morning, I have a few instances where I forget that. It didn't feel bad, but I can see how this might be a problem for the devs. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my retelling of the feedback. And before we leave, I have something that I wanted to share with you right here at the end. It's a Reddit post by Mr. Axolotl. And I'm not going to read everything, but I recommend you do. Again, the link is in the description. It's a post called Feeling a Bit Dejected After Playing Draw Steel. And Mr. Axolotl just retells his experience playing Draw Steel for the first time and feeling like they didn't do a good job, that the game was harder than they expected, that they weren't as prepared as they wanted to. And they had only played 5e before, I think. And going to a second game was really hard and they weren't expecting it. I'm just summarizing overall. I hope I'm not misrepresenting their point here. But I got in touch with Mr. Axolotl. I shared my opinion about his experience. I said that I thought that was normal, that your second RPG is really hard to play because you're used to something, and then it's like a second language, right? Your first language you learn naturally from watching other people. The second language is the hardest one to learn. And then the third language, you can draw comparisons to the first and the second. So it gets a little easier. So your second RPG is also the hardest one. So I shared my thoughts, and then they said they were going to report back once they had their second session, talking about what kind of advice worked for them. And overall, overall, they said that the best thing was to feel that they weren't alone, that other people had felt like they felt. They liked this advice of the second RPG being the hardest. They just felt like it was normal. They didn't do anything wrong. And I think this is the attitude. I just wanted to share this experience because I feel like a lot of people are going to feel this way when they play Draw Steel for the first time. Most of the people listening to this are either backers or Patreon subscribers, so they probably already played the game, but maybe they haven't. And once they play it, they're going to say, this game sucks, right? This game doesn't work. I don't understand the rules. It's way too hard. But I suggest you wait a second. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't be too hard on the game. You're not alone. Other people have been through what you're going through, right? I suggest playing it again, trying it one more time, and seeing if it feels better. Maybe the game's not for you. That's okay. But maybe it was just this experience of having your second RPG be the one that feels the hardest to learn, right? So yeah, I just wanted to put this here at the end of the episode so we don't forget that once this game hits, your first impression might not be the best one, okay? So just remember that, and see you on the next episode. Now for the outro. And that's all, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and the topics I chose this time. Make sure you check out this episode's description for links to Matt's and James's Twitch channels, MCDM's and Matt's YouTube channels, Drawsteel's, MCDM's and Matt's subreddits, MCDM's Patreon, MCDM's Discord, all of my socials, the Dice Society's mailing list, and the show notes for this episode. Before you leave, make sure to rate the podcast in your platform of choice and leave a comment on YouTube and Spotify if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes. See you all next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.